This year is the 75th anniversary of the Allied invasion of Normandy in northern France, commonly referred to as D-Day. When you say D-Day, I think everybody recognizes that. Chuck Roberts joins us this morning, military historian, Vice Commander of American Legion Post 403, and curator of Roberts Armory World War II Museum in Rochelle. And this is a historical review of D-Day. So can you give us some background on the invasion?
Sure. In 1940, German forces overran France. This was a shock to the Allied nations, which set in motion a plan to take back the country and give it back to the French. The British had successfully resisted the German invasion. Consequently, at a meeting with the British at the Trident Conference in Washington in 1943, a plan was developed to amass a large amphibious landing force in England and launch a cross-English Channel amphibious assault on the beaches of northern France to take back the country. D-Day was anticipated to be early June 1944. It should be noted that in military parlance, D-Day is the day the attack would begin. There were several D-Days in World War II, such as D-Day Operation Dragoon, D-Day Operation Husky, D-Day Operation Market Garden, and D-Day Operation Varsity. However, the invasion of Normandy, which was called Operation Overlord, is the invasion most often referred to as D-Day.
What was the plan for the invasion?
Okay, the closest French landmass to England was the region of Pas-de-Calais. The Germans figured that this would be the invasion route so they could move a substantial defensive force in that area. The Allies themselves launched Operation Fortitude, a plan to deceive the Germans on where the landing might take place. General Patton was put in charge of a fictitious army, the 1st U.S. Army Group, that was to be based in England opposite Calais. Fake vehicles and tanks made out of rubber were placed around northern England, and radio traffic was increased in this area with the purpose of suggesting to the Germans that a large force was being staged. This reinforced the German thought that the invasion would come from this area and the objective was Calais. German high command bought the deception hook, line, and sinker. Rommel, however, was not convinced and continued to reinforce defensive positions further south. In actuality, the objective of Operation Overlord, or D-Day, was Normandy, a region in France further south. The beaches could support heavy tanks, and the sea around the beaches could handle large landing ships.
And what preparations were involved?
Okay, thousands of troops and tons of equipment began to arrive in England. Convoys of equipment and troops were crossing the Atlantic in large numbers in preparation for the invasion. Practice landings were made at Slapton Sands at the south of England. Many U.S. soldiers were housed in the personal homes of English citizens. Firing range practice was held at Castle Martin in Pembroke, Wales, while maneuvers were practiced near Ogbourne, St. George. There were so many Allied troops and tons of equipment in England that many English people said that the island was beginning to sink.
So now we get into the execution of D-Day, the D-Day plan. So how did that progress?
The launch date D-Day was scheduled for June 5th, 1944. This was the best time for favorable tides that would facilitate unloading of landing craft. The landing craft sailed and awaited the order to proceed to the landing. However, a storm had brewed up, and the weather conditions made any landing impractical. Meanwhile, many of the personnel waiting for the order to land were in landing craft getting seasick on the rough waters of the English Channel. Eisenhower had to postpone the operation for at least a day. The following day, June 6th, there was a forecast that the storm would subside slightly, and since they would have to wait at least a month for another favorable tide condition, Eisenhower gave the word to commence with the operation. His speech to the troops started with the words, "You are about to embark on the Great Crusade." On June 6, airborne troops and glider-borne troops moved inland. As the morning broke, 5 beaches started to receive the amphibious force. Utah and Omaha beaches were assigned to the Americans. Sword and Gold beaches were assigned to the British. Juno Beach was assigned to the Canadians. All assault troops made the landings and advanced inland with the exception of the Americans at Omaha Beach. The Americans were expected to encounter a German regiment defending the cliffs of the beach, but in actuality it was an entire German division. The casualties were high, more than all the other 4 beaches combined. But perseverance and individual heroism resulted in a breakthrough and final capture of the beach and in the inland areas. Allied casualties were at least 10,000, with over 4,000 confirmed dead. Over 160,000 troops crossed the English Channel on D-Day. Adolf Hitler believed the Normandy landings to be a diversion, and that the main invasion was at the Pas de Calais. This delayed German reinforcements, which helped the Allies to readily consolidate positions inland. Also, Rommel had returned to Germany, and other commanders were attending conferences, figuring that no invasion would occur in such bad weather. This was a disruption to German command, which added to the delayed German response.
And what was the result?
The result was the Allies gained a foothold in northern France, which led to the breakout across France to the German border. Mobile harbors called mulberries were brought in to handle a large amount of supplies required for an army to traverse northern Europe. This opened up a second front in Europe, which took pressure off the Russian allies fighting on the Eastern Front. The Normandy landings were the largest seaborne invasion in history, with over 5,000 landing craft, 289 escort ships, and 277 minesweepers. The success of the Normandy landing was a result of several factors. Firstly, the Germans had only completed about 20% of the defensive fortifications. Secondly, the deception from Operation Fortitude confused the Germans on where the landing would take place, so they had to spread their defensive forces over a wide area. Thirdly, the Allies had attained air superiority, limiting the German aircraft attacks and reconnaissance. Fourthly, the French resistance hampered German troop movements. And finally, the absence of key generals and the complex German command structure prevented rapid defensive counterattacks. The Normandy invasion set up the stage for Allied armies to march across Europe, liberate Paris, and proceed to Germany with the final surrender on May 7, 1945.